Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to Slumpbuster with Juju and Dre, episode 19. Find us on major streaming platforms. On today's episode, we talk about the coaching carousel, who should be fired, who should be hired, pick our favorite XFL team, and talk about bad ownership and how that affects the franchise. Without further ado, welcome to our show.
He's really good at that fake, Lamar Jackson. But when you consider his dark skin color with a dark football, with a dark uniform, you could not see that thing. I mean, you literally could not see when he was in and out of the mesh point.
Like once every 4 or 5 years, you know that? Like some 50, 55-year-old white dude tries to explain why black people are kicking the shit out of white people in practically every major sport, you know? And it always goes down the same way, right? There's always like 3 white dudes, and the one white dude in the middle, he's always like the guy with like the theory. You know, he's always like, it seems these African-American athletes, they seem to have this quick twitch muscle fiber. You know, there's a slow twitch, and there's this quick twitch. And the second the dude says that, like the other 2 white dudes start like sliding out of frame, like, okay, this guy's getting fired, and I'm not going to be part of this highlight. Nice knowing you, Ned. Keep that seat warm, right?
Dre!
Juju!
Dre!
Juju.
Jack!
So, right as you hit record, it started messing up, of course. Our internet connection or something. Now everything's okay. I can hear you. I can hear you, Juju.
Gotcha. Some minor technical difficulties, but we can get into the podcast, people. Second podcast of the week for me, so I'm running off fumes, but I can do this. I'm dedicated to providing the best sports content for our listeners. And unlike Tony and Khabib, we will progress nonetheless without interruptions because hopefully this is not a Jinx podcast.
Yeah, now that you just said that, Juju, both of them are going to get hurt or one of them is going to get hurt, but the fight's going to be canceled. Thanks, Juju.
Let's hope not. Let's not hope they're not at a press tour and someone suddenly turns to sign an autograph and tears their ACL, because apparently that's happened before.
Literally anything that these guys do, whenever they're going to fight each other, whenever they've signed their name on the dotted line to fight each other, they can do anything and get hurt. They could even be opening a beer and hurt themselves.
It's so ridiculous. It kind of just reminds me of like the most ridiculous sports injuries that I've ever heard in my life. I think it was like Chipper Jones, former third baseman for the Atlanta Braves, put himself on the DL trying to iron a shirt while wearing the shirt. I think that's up there as far as one of the most ridiculous sports injuries I've ever seen. What's a sports injury that comes to mind? I'm sure you've heard of some ridiculous ones.
Oh, man. I know one that really pissed me off when Steve Nash was on the Lakers. There was like stories of him about him playing soccer in the summertime and he's doing all these cool things to get in shape. And the dude hurt himself picking up luggage off of the airplane, landing it into LA, and was out for like the entire season because he hurt something in his back. Pissed me off.
Big time Giants fan, obviously. So I think one of their pitchers during like a championship year put himself on the DL, try and pick up his kid too quickly. And another one fell off the trampoline at one point. That doesn't even compare to the one that put himself on the DL trying to open up some frozen hamburger patties and cut himself with a knife.
Hey, to be honest, I've done something like that before. So, those frozen hamburger patties, man, they're hard to get open.
They will get you. So that kind of reminds me of like my first time ever going to a party, right? Get out there, manage to sneak over a bottle of tequila. So naturally, tequila needs some limes, right? So I get recommended to go to the kitchen, start cutting up some limes. Now, as someone who's at his first party, never drank a sip of alcohol, and had tequila in my system, putting a sharp object in my hands was probably not the most recommended decision. Not to mention, it hurt twice as much when you consider a cut with citric acid in the vicinity of it. Double whammy for me there on that one.
Yeah, that would be painful. I'm trying to think of some other ones. Oh, there's also Jason Pierre-Paul. It's a little bit less funny, but the fireworks, right? Holding fireworks in their hand.
Kind of more sad, but it's a great PSA for the kids, especially around every single 4th of July celebration. Hey, just put up a billboard of Jason Pierre-Paul and you're fine.
Yeah, do not hold fireworks with your fingers. Bad idea. Just saying.
Yeah, at least recommended safe distance. So I remember that story. I just don't remember, like, what was he doing? Did he just not, like, throw it in time? Did you just have it in his hand?
I don't know. I can't remember. I know you always hear about these things during, like, the 4th of July and New Year's. I can't remember if it was like it wasn't going off, so they moved it, right? They tried to pick it up or what was going on. All I know is they had to remake a glove for him because it totally messed up his fingers.
Still a beast, nonetheless.
Oh, absolutely. But that does suck, though. So
Well, New Year's Eve's coming around, so who knows? We might have to throw up some Jason Pierre-Paul posters for that one. All right, so let's get into it. So obviously, like I mentioned, Khabib, Tony, that is finally official. It's signed on the dotted line. We should see it roughly around, I believe I read April.
Yep, that sounds correct.
Now, everyone's put it out there. This is probably Khabib's toughest test. And that's saying something. He has faced, like Conor, he has faced some big names along the line. Do you believe it? Because my thing on it, again, is I got to see someone beat Khabib before I can believe someone can actually beat Khabib.
Yeah. So this is the thing that I was talking about with one of my friends the other day at work is, yes, it's hard to see anybody beating Khabib. And I 100%, like if Khabib wins this fight, I will not be surprised at all, right? Like the dude's hardly even lost a round. And even the one round that he has lost in MMA, you can argue that he shouldn't have lost that round. That being said, MMA is such a fun sport because nobody stays undefeated forever.
Mm-hmm.
The closest maybe is going to be a John Jones, but even him, like there's questions about is he on steroids, right? His last few fights, he hasn't looked that good. So if he doesn't retire soon, maybe somebody is going to catch him. He also didn't fight, Anthony Rumble Johnson, who a lot of people thought could have knocked him out with his knockout power. And so that's the risk that you run with Khabib is it's hard to say that Khabib's going to lose when nobody has seen the game plan to beat Khabib. Like, what is the game plan and how do you beat Khabib? We haven't seen it yet. So I 100% get where you're coming from. But like I said, nobody stays undefeated forever in MMA. And I think if there is anybody that's going to beat Khabib at this weight class, it's going to be Tony Ferguson.
Now, here's an interesting question about it. What if Ferguson goes in there, gets curb stomped like everyone else? Then what's really the next test for Khabib? Should he just call it a career at that point? Or just wait for another newcomer that we could keep moving the goalposts as far as greatest of all time legacy goes?
Me personally, I already have him up there as far as some of the greats go. I think he's even possibly better than GSP, though a lot of people really like GSP, and he's up there. He was sort of fighting in that era where you have some of the greats, the Anderson Silvas and stuff like that. But Khabib, I would like to see him personally go up to 170 and take a 170 fight. I know it's a lot more dangerous for Khabib. He doesn't have a whole lot to gain out of it outside of showing that, hey, I can still be just as dominant at a weight class a little bit higher. He does run the risk of a few of those stronger guys, right? You'd have your Jorge Masvidals that'll be at full strength right around there.
Mm-hmm.
You got Kobe Covingtons and Cameron Usmans and those guys. A little bit dangerous right around there. But I would like to see Khabib push himself. And if he is able to even win a second belt and stay undefeated, I think he definitely has a good claim to being the greatest of all time for sure.
I think one of the biggest difference makers in his legacy would be being able to win at another weight class. We see so many of the better champions. John in his next fight is probably going to be at heavyweight. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Conor, we're seeing him go up to 170 to face Cowboy this coming fight in January. Mm-hmm. And it would be a difference maker in terms of his career mark, especially because he's running out of guys to face now at that weight class. Being able to face, like you said, a Colby or Masvidal or any of those contenders would be good for the sport because you're running out of big-time fights if you're the UFC right now to be able to promote, mostly with Khabib. Past this Tony fight, then you're really only hyping up maybe a McGregor rematch. Nate's out, probably retired at this point. If you're Dana, you're going to have to go to Khabib and say, hey, we need you to move up because we need to be able to sell fights with you. Because we mentioned it, and we're kind of like talking about, so this is a little preview for our listeners. We're talking about doing a Fighter of the Decade type series. And one of the things that hurts Khabib compared to other dominant fighters of this time period is he's not really that big of a draw. Mm-hmm. Specifically here in the States, obviously he has a huge following in Russia. I don't want to dismiss that. Russian viewers still count, but in terms of fiscally, probably not as much. And that definitely hurts the UFC. So you can argue his impact hasn't been as great over this decade as many of the other fighters of the time period. He needs more fights past the year 2019 as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The other sort of calculus that's involved with Khabib and his next move is the fact that he is Russian. So a lot of people don't know this, but Russians love their fighters, whether they're wrestlers, whether they're kickboxers, boxers, or MMA fighters. And so honestly, Khabib is probably getting paid by Vladimir Putin. Like, and I'm not even, I say it and it's kind of funny that Vladimir Putin, president of Russia or whatever you want to call him, is paying fighters and stuff. He legit does. I've had coaches that have wrestled in Russia, and those guys, when they retire, if you're an Olympic champ, you've got a job with the KGB and you're getting paid all kinds of money. And so I think the thing is, does Khabib want to go down as the greatest fighter of all time? And if so, is he willing to go up another weight class up to 170 to fight? Or Is Russia giving him enough profit to where he can say, hey, look, I don't need the UFC anymore. I cleaned out the lightweight division. It's time for me to take another job, maybe with the KGB or be Vladimir Putin's #1 bodyguard, something like that. But there's a lot of weird things that happen in Russia that also add to the complexity of what Khabib's next move is if he wins this fight.
Like you said, like everyone's kind of like said about this one, Tony has a chance, but I don't know. It just feels like Tony's just trying to build up this fight more than it is to also get himself a big payday. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he has enough bullets to take down the monster that is Khabib Nurmagomedov.
So here's my thing. So I'm just going to come out and say it. I think I'm going to take Tony Ferguson in this fight.
Okay.
I'm puckering as I do that, right? It pains me. I love Khabib. I love Khabib's style. A lot of people hate it. They're like, all he wants to do is grab people. Yeah, absolutely. You win the fight what you're good at, and that's what Khabib does. He takes you down, beats your face in. I love Khabib as a fighter. I love him as a person. I love how passionate he is. And it's hard for me to choose against Khabib. Like I said, if Khabib wins this fight, I will not be surprised. Khabib's likely going to stick with his game plan. He's going to try to take Tony down and pound his face in. But Tony, he might not have a lot of bullets of one kind, but he's got a lot of different bullets is the thing. Khabib has a lot of bullets of the same kind, right? So Khabib's coming at you with a shotgun, and that's all he's got. Tony, on the other hand, he's got 22s, he's got shotguns, he's got 50 cals, he's got a whole, arsenal that he can utilize. He's funky. He can get out of some of those takedowns doing some of his weird rolls. His striking is really smooth. He just throws punches and kicks. He comes out of everything and transitions super well. So every strike that he throws, he follows up with like an elbow or a knee or something like that, and then moves his head to get out of the way again. And Khabib, whenever he strikes, he sort of ducks his head down straight forward and just starts swinging over the top. And I think Tony's going to be able to capitalize. And Tony's really good at jits off of his back. So I think those are the two things where I don't even want to say I give the edge to Ferguson. I just think that, like I said, nobody stays undefeated forever. So I'm going to choose Ferguson in this one.
The whole time when you were just breaking down like Tony's arsenal, I was just thinking, oh, so you're saying the American has like a big gun inventory. Then that makes sense.
I mean, I'm just saying Second Amendment rights, Juju. Second Amendment.
I'm with it.
Go America.
Go America. All right, so I guess moving on from fighting news. So there was a coach that was dealt a knockout blow this week. Riverboat Ron Rivera, he is out as the Carolina Panthers head coach. Let's start off just first in Carolina. From the Panther side and Ron's side, do you think that this firing was justified?
The past few seasons have not been good for Ron Rivera. And it's sad, right? He was able to get them to a Super Bowl. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to capitalize on that. But he is a Super Bowl level coach and talent. I think there's been some issues when it comes to injury that it's just been a little bit unfortunate. I would have liked to have seen them stick it out the rest of the season. There wasn't that many more games left in the season. Mm-hmm. He had done even a good job as soon as Cam Newton went out. So I thought like, hey, even though, we know that Kyle Allen's young and we know that it was sort of a change of plans from Cam Newton, the fact that he was still able to get some wins and still able to capitalize and go through adversity and handle adversity and still able to put up some wins, I thought that was a testament to Ron Rivera's coaching skills for sure. And granted, it's not the season that the fans want. It's not the season that the owners want. But I still thought Rivera at least deserved to finish out the season. But I'm not too surprised.
Yeah, I've heard both sides attack that. Like, on one hand, is it better that they fired him now? That way both Panthers and Ron Rivera could start looking for their next job, looking for their next opportunity. Mm-hmm. Or should you have let him finish out the season? Because we've seen a lot of coaches get fired, not on Black Monday like is tradition, but to get fired 3 to 4 weeks with the season left to go. A famous case, obviously, is Mike McCarthy with the Packers last year. And obviously, Mike McCarthy never benefited from it. He's still unemployed at this given time. And the Packers, I mean, I don't know how much due diligence they did, but they ended up with Matt LaFleur, which I don't know if that was necessarily their first choice, but it's certainly the coach that they ended up with out of it. When you look at Ron Rivera's legacy in Carolina, his record as the Panthers head coach, 76, 63-1, obviously made it to the Super Bowl, but he did have a little bit of inconsistencies. 2015, huge year, 15-1, that's amazing. But then he followed it up with 6-10, then back into the winning season column with 11-5, then 7-9, and this year they're currently 5-7. Now, one of the big things I've heard a lot of people throw out there, if you're Ron Rivera, you got to put at the top of your resume, I went 5-5 with Kyle Allen. So come on, guys. You got to give me some props here.
No, I mean, definitely, right, is how difficult, and we've seen it time and time again, that a backup quarterback comes in, And it's just difficult to get wins in a league that is so quarterback driven. Like really good quarterbacks, we can even see the difference, right? With, your Lamar Jacksons and your Russell Wilsons, they can elevate your team. Even Aaron Rodgers of old, I don't know if Aaron Rodgers is quite at that level still, but they can definitely help you get wins. And when those guys go out and you're on a backup quarterback, the fact that you can even stay afloat, right, with a Kyle Allen or with any backup quarterback, that's a testament, I think, to how good of a coach you are.
So Ron Rivera came into the season on the hot seat from the get-go because obviously David Tepper, he's the new owner over there. A lot of people thought, okay, well, he's at the point where he probably just wants to bring in his guys, his people. One of the big stories surrounding his recent hires is he wants to bring in this Stanford-educated analytics guy to sit under the GM, which is interesting because he didn't fire the GM. You still have a lot of questions with Cam Newton. Do you bring back Cam, given his contract? It is more team-friendly, and the weapons are still there for this team to compete.
I don't think that I would bring back Cam. I think it's time that you start to move off him. And I say this just, one, the injuries, like he's on IR even, and he was injured last year. He's had a history of injuries. I think the team's just not as motivated with Cam. Like we saw the same team with Cam earlier in the season play with him and not do as well. And Kyle Allen was sort of that juice that they had needed. And there'll be some quarterbacks that'll be coming up through the future drafts. So I think it's time to move off of Cam Newton. It's also a good sign of like, hey, that was sort of the old regime. We're coming in. We got new ownership. We'll have a new coach. And so I think it'd be wise to let the GM, coach, and whoever the Stanford analytics dude maybe take their chances at, hey, we're going to find our own quarterback and move off of Cam.
Okay, so you're on pro complete rebuild. Just blow up this Panthers team and see what you can pull together. I guess that kind of makes sense because at this point, we do know that their ceiling is a little bit capped. I don't think that they're ever going to be at that level of a Super Bowl winning roster with the current pieces they have in place. Players like Luke Kuechly are starting to lose a step. But obviously, you can build a little bit around Christian McCaffrey. DJ Moore is a solid wide receiver. They have something good with Curtis Samuel. So there's these nice little pieces. What do? Are you going all in like the Dolphins and just kind of shipping everyone out of town to acquire draft picks? Because we've seen tanking doesn't really work out perfectly in the NFL. I don't think there's really been a great example of tanking so far for success. The Browns were tanking, and the Browns are still mediocre, even disappointing.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. And I mean, there's been several teams, right, that have been sort of at the top of the draft the past few years. We've got the Giants, they're still not good. The Jets, still not good. The Redskins, still not good. Miami's still not good. Like
Raiders have been at the top of the draft for like 20 years and still haven't had a great season.
Hey, this season is going well for them, Juju.
Yeah, tell that to their negative 80 point differential.
Going better, I should say. But no, you're exactly right. I think you have to keep your good pieces that you have now and maybe try to bring in some free agents, see what you can move around. See if you can get rid of some draft picks and maybe try to bring in some free agents while you still have your Christian McCaffreys and those guys that you got to be able to capitalize when they're good. And I think this was the whole argument when it came to Chicago, is Chicago had that really nice defense that they're able to put together last year. And people had said, like, last year, this year, and maybe next year is sort of their window for a Super Bowl. And if they can't figure out the offense and be able to capitalize with the pieces that they have, their window basically closes. And I think it'll be the same. Is like, if you've got your Christian McCaffreys and you got your good pieces like that, let's build now. Let's try to get some free agents. Let's try to move some stuff, get some trades going, and see if we can take our shot now. If it still doesn't work in the next 2 years, your window's likely closed. Then you 100% blow it up.
Well, regardless of who's quarterback next year for the Carolina Panthers, this offense is going to run through Christian McCaffrey. Even with Cam in the starting lineup, it was still very Christian McCaffrey-centric. Now, that brings up the next question, obviously, is who is going to be the Carolina Panthers head coach? Because right now, there is a ton of opportunity in the NFL head coaching search. We're going to talk about it here in a minute. Jason Garrett, we said 98% chance he was out as the Cowboys head coach. Yeah, that's 100% after their just gutless performance on Thursday night. I think that Anthony Lynn is in trouble in Los Angeles, San Diego, whatever you want to call them, because I just don't know what Anthony Lynn exactly does that makes the Chargers better. When it comes to Freddie Kitchens, did he get bashed over the head? Because what was that decision to wear that shirt? That shirt might as well just said, "Fire me," that he was wearing the other night.
I know. Like, how do you put a bigger target on your back, and how do you look so more unprofessional than what Freddie Kitchens did the other night?
whole separate subject, but just the guy is gone. He needs to be gone, because I expected that kind of stuff out of like Baker Mayfield, not the coach that's supposed to be telling Baker Mayfield not to do stuff like that.
Yeah, that's just poor decisions, right? And that's one thing, if you want to even provide those shirts to your players and be like, hey, feel free to wear these guys, like, and I'll keep it on the down low. But as the coach, you just can't do that. That's incredibly unprofessional.
It's Bush League, honestly. It's such Bush League that he even wore that shirt. And it's just ridiculous, because you're a grown man. You know how to dress yourself. You know you're a public figure too, so you're going to be seen in public with that shirt on. Dumb. Washington Redskins. So that's already a vacant position right now. We know Dan Snyder is one of the biggest hindrances there. But I will say this on Snyder's benefit. He's not scared to spend money. He just has a big problem with spending it in the wrong places. If you're the new Redskins coach, you have to come in knowing this guy is attached to you at the hip. He's mini Jerry Jones. And obviously, like coaches like Kyle Shanahan, the entire Shanahan family has nothing but terrible things to say about this Redskins organization. So it doesn't help that they're hated in the coaching community because of those two. Pat Shurmur, Adam Gase, both New York coaching positions might be open at the end of this year. Pat Shurmur was an underqualified head coach when he first got hired. Adam Gase just keeps finding ways to make this Jets team look even more mediocre. This past weekend was the second time this season they have given a winless team their first win. Probably the most charitable organization in the NFL right now. Matt Patricia, Detroit Lions. It started off pretty well for the Lions. They were that scrappy team. They had some good stuff going for them. They tried to implement that New England culture. Well, it hasn't worked. It's backfired. Now they're back to the same trash mediocrity that the Lions have been since our existence. You know, the last 50 years, this franchise hasn't really done much. And Matt Patricia is just an extension of it. I don't think he was even a good defensive coordinator when he was in New England, so it always bewildered me when he got this job. And then lastly,
in his defense, though, their quarterback is hurt, right? And has been hurt for these past few weeks. It wasn't the start of their slide, right? Like they started sliding a little bit before that.
But with that said, Matthew Stafford can't play defense. And when you were hired as a defensive coordinator from New England, you would think that their defense would be a little bit better than what they've been, just absolute garbage. And yet they're trading away prominent defensive backs like Quandre Diggs, who's having a pretty good year right now in Seattle. So what does that tell you?
Can't argue that.
Okay. And then the last one I'll leave here, and probably one of the most undesirable ones, is going to be Doug Marrone, Jacksonville. There's been a lot of tension between him and Tom Coughlin. Obviously, the Jags have underperformed. Now you have this whole Nick Foles, Gardner Minshew situation that unfolded. And I think Doug Marrone, he's on his last legs over there too. Mm-hmm. So if you're Ron, hey, you have an opportunity here to get a new coaching job. Where do you think is a good place for Ron Rivera to end up?
So if I'm Ron Rivera, this is going to be tough. And so none of these spots are perfect. And we named a lot of reasons for why all of these spots are going to be open and why they're so hard to fill. If you're the Chargers, you're always going to be playing pretty much right behind the Rams. I mean, if you're Dallas, you've got Jerry Jones always whispering in your ear. And, you know, they're the big market team of the NFL. They're the team that the media is always going to be right there in your face. Every loss is going to be a big deal. Every win, everybody, you know, all your fans are going to think you're going to the Super Bowl. And so the media is just right there in your face all the time. Atlanta's, since they went to the Super Bowl, they have not been good, right? And it's going to take a lot to get them back to that level of play. Cleveland has just been a mess. Redskins. So like you said, I don't want to rehash all of them, but none of these spots are perfect. If I'm Ron Rivera, though, I think I'm going for the Dallas job. I think you've got a Dak Prescott that plays a little bit similar to a Cam Newton. You've got a lot of pieces there. I think you can motivate the guys a lot better. You've made it to a Super Bowl. You can say, hey, I know how to get this team to a Super Bowl. I think you've already got, like I said, pieces in place. That would be my choice.
Now, I think that would be a great place for Ron Rivera to end up, but I don't think it's the type of decision that Jerry Jones would make. I think Jerry Jones obviously likes his team control. He likes to have his say in things, and that's not going to fly with an old school guy like Ron Rivera. I think that Ron is, I've heard this term thrown around, one of the last remaining like CEO type head coaches where they just run the entire ship. Ron Rivera, for being a defensive guy, he doesn't necessarily run the defense anymore out there in Carolina, but he was on top of every coaching decision that was made there. But when it comes to the Dallas job, I think that it would also be inopportune for the Cowboys. I think if you're the Cowboys, you want to look for your coach for the next decade. And Ron Rivera's up there. Defensive head coaches just in general are kind of like becoming like the dinosaurs, becoming like centers in the NBA where teams are moving away from them. So I think that when we talk about like the younger coaches, the next up and comers like a Lincoln Riley, I think those are the better options for them. Josh McDaniels is a name that's come up for the Cowboys. And although things didn't work out perfectly for Josh McDaniels in Denver and the New England offense has sputtered, I think he's a more likely candidate to end up with the Cowboys than Ron Rivera.
Yeah, and I think you're right. The personality and the relationship with Jerry Jones is going to be huge in whoever that coach is for Dallas because, like I said, there's going to be tons of spotlight. Every time you lose, Jerry Jones is going to say something, that Jerry Jones is going to want his say and, what players are selected in the draft or what free agents you go after, what trades you make. That's all going to be Jerry Jones. And so that relationship is going to be incredibly important. And you're exactly right. Ron Rivera, I don't think him and Jerry Jones would necessarily mesh so well. I think they'd be more clashy. Though, if I'm Jerry Jones, I might be willing to say, hey, I'm going to take a step back. Ron Rivera knows what he's doing. I'm going with him. But you have great points.
I completely missed one of the teams too I listed here. The Atlanta Falcons, I think Dan Quinn is pretty much out. Even though the Falcons have looked better in recent days, I don't think that they're going to retain Dan Quinn as well. With that said, how do you rank these positions? If I had to throw it out there myself, I'm going to go like this. I think Dallas is number one. I think that it's impossible to just ignore that they're the biggest brand in the NFL themselves. Then I would say the Giants are my number two pick. I don't love it just because you're tied at the hip with Daniel Jones for at least a couple years. You have Gettleman there as well. I don't think it's a great landing spot, but I do think that just in general, the Maras, the Giants organization has been one of the better run in football over the last 20 years. So I would probably rank the Giants job as my second option. At number three, I would list Atlanta. I mean, you have building pieces such as Matt Ryan there, Julio Jones. You have a ton of talent there on that roster. You just need to be able to get them remotivated again. They probably need an offensive-minded head coach to get them running like they were in peak 2016 Atlanta Falcons. My fourth, I would probably say that Carolina Panthers job. I do think that Carolina, for being an expansion team, they've been to the Super Bowl twice in the last 20 years. They've shown that they can build a championship organization. And yeah, they've just maintained a somewhat winning culture despite transitioning from John Fox to Ron Rivera, the Cam Newton years. They've been pretty well run. At number five, and I'm going to end it at 5 here, and this is where things get a little bit hard. I would say if the Chargers job is open, I would like it. But if not, I would say Cleveland at 5, just because I still believe there is talent on that roster. I don't know if OBJ is going to be there next year. There's going to be some interesting fixes that they're going to have to do with that roster. But I at least think that Baker can be a franchise quarterback still. I think Myles Garrett, when he gets back onto the field, will be a fine defensive piece to build around. I like what they got out there. And I don't know. We'll see how the league adjusts to Lamar Jackson. But I'm not going to say that the AFC North is necessarily his for the next 10 to 20 years.
Okay. I mean, I like a lot of the teams that you said. In fact, I think almost all the teams that you said will be my 5, though the orders are probably going to be a little bit different. So Dallas, if you're capable of handling the media and you're capable of handling Jerry Jones, I think that's got to be the number one job. You've got good pieces still. You've got the biggest fan base in America. You're going to play the most primetime games. I think it's going to be Dallas. And let's be honest, their division is not very good right now either, right? So I would take the Dallas job number 1. After that, I think I'm actually going to go the Panthers for some of the reasons that we'd said. You still have Christian McCaffrey. You still got some really good building blocks around you. They were in a Super Bowl not too long ago. You've got a new ownership. So you and the owners can sort of talk about the direction you want to head, right? So I would take that. After that, probably Atlanta. Similar to what you said, you got Matt Ryan. You got a few pieces, some receivers there. Then I think I would take Cleveland as my fourth, mostly because you've got a good GM and you've got some really good offensive weapons right now. You've got some good running backs behind you. You've got, like you said, Baker could potentially be that franchise quarterback that you're looking for. And those are hard to find. We've seen it this year. A lot of teams that had to pull in some rookies that maybe looked okay and then petered out. Baker, I think, can be a franchise quarterback. You've got some good receivers now out there with Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. So I'm going Cleveland there. And then my last pick, I'm going to go with, if it's open, like you said, the Chargers.
Interesting. So you just completely left the Giants off the list.
Yep.
Okay. Like I said, I think that the Giants, they've been one of the blue blood organizations in football over their existence. And if you win in New York, though, you become beloved for life. Look at Eli, who's going to start this week. We'll talk about that. But, even despite mediocrity, because he had some winning years for them, he's always going to be loved in New York. So it could work one of two ways. Either you're going to be loved or hated for life. Like you said, you're a tough, built head coach, and you could deal with media scrutiny, then the New York job's fine. So we mentioned the best landing spots. Let's talk about the worst, the ones we didn't mention. Washington. That would be my worst ranked place to go. Just because, like I said, Dan Snyder, well reported that he's hard to work with. You have just a talentless roster, really. I don't really see too many pieces that I really like on this roster that I can see myself building around. Maybe guys, I'm not sold on Haskins right now. I know they won a couple of games, but they've won a couple of games by running the ball 30 or 40 times a game. I don't think that's sustainable long term. We're in a passing league. You got to be able to throw the ball a little bit, and I don't think they have the pieces to do that. Yeah, Washington's just a mess. I think that's my most dysfunctional organization I could list. Jacksonville's close for me. Detroit's up there. Even the Jets, I think, are fine. Like, the Jets are maybe just outside my top 5 just because I think that in theory, Sam Darnold should be fine. They've been to the playoffs a few times here in the last 10 years. So they're not completely inept as an organization. They are pretty bad, but I won't sell them down the road nearly as much as the other teams I've talked about.
Yeah. So going back to your first point or question that you sort of asked me about leaving the Giants off, the Giants would be sort of my 6th pick. And mostly, like you said, they've got some history. They've got a good fan base. But I still worry about their ties to Eli Manning, right? And you're having to deal with that. If you truly believe that, hey, there's a good quarterback that's coming up in the draft, you have to get Eli Manning's stamp of approval. And that's why they're stuck with Daniel Jones. That's why I think they're stuck with Daniel Jones. Is Daniel Jones was he went to the Manning's camp of football.
Okay.
We like Manning, and that's why we're going with Daniel Jones, because he's got Eli Manning's stamp of approval.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're a coach coming into that position, you're at least guaranteed to have Daniel Jones the next 3 to 4 years. We haven't seen Daniel Jones play well here at all the last few weeks. In fact, I mean, if you look at it, I mentioned the double-digit fumbles stat. That's almost unheard of for a quarterback position. And fumbles hurt you twice as much as interceptions, because whereas in interception, you get about like 20, 30 yards down the field, a fumble happens in the backfield. So hurts your team twice as much. I think it's correctable, but still. And then obviously the guy was a 0-star recruit coming out of high school. So how sold are we on Daniel Jones long-term as a prospect? I've completely reverted back. I'm sorry. Daniel Jones' hate train is still alive and well. Maybe he'll bounce back now that I'm talking shit again. We've seen Trubisky come out firing again. But yeah, no, I think that the Giants are fine. I think a top 5 pick this year, they might get Chase Young, the Ohio State defensive end. There's something to like about that New York job.
Yeah, and like I said, it's not awful. That's why I have it at 6, right? Like, they're definitely my next team. They're better than the Redskins for sure, who's awful. I'm not going to rehash that. They're just bad. That's my number 1 worst job for me, right?
I guess I would say, though, like, you rank them above the Chargers job. Or the Chargers job above the Giants job. Now,
I did.
Why I don't like that as much is just because Philip Rivers, we know it's probably done. We don't know what's going to happen when they do get into that Los Angeles stadium. If fan attendance is still down for their games, what is their long-term plan? We've heard rumblings about them getting relocated. I think that's a lot to take on if you're a coach coming into that situation. And especially not knowing who your franchise quarterback is going to be for the next 5 to 10 years. I think definitely hurts that gravitas of that position.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mostly rank it off of how close you are to Long Beach. And because you are so close to Long Beach, I take that LA job above the Giants. You're right, though. It is close. And, okay, maybe I put them sort of tied. Like, it is attractive. It's more attractive, I think, than even the Jets, even though I would say the Jets maybe are even a little bit better right now from a football standpoint, like slightly, maybe. But I think the Giants, you just have a better chance at attracting free agents. You do have a better chance at, you're going to get a good draft pick. Daniel Jones, we've seen sparks of like, hey, he could be a good quarterback in the league. He's garbage right now, right? So we're going to talk crap about him until he's good again.
So I guess I'll challenge you again, though, on the Carolina point. So, I mean, I put Carolina in my top 5, but the reason I didn't put them, so you put them at 2, is because David Tepper, a lot of people are really propping him up on a pedestal, but it's because probably he's the shiny new toy. We don't know what kind of owner he's going to be. Is he going to be more Dean Spanos? Is he going to be a Jerry Jones type? Or is he going to be like Robert Kraft and just let his guys just go out there and do what they want and get tugged off in Miami?
Yeah, I mean, and absolutely, I get that point. But part of it, though, whenever you get a new owner.
You're just going to let that tugged off in Miami line just go, aren't you?
I'm going to try to avoid that. Right. Keep it appropriate in here. But I mean, whenever you get a new owner, I just think that it allows you to come in as a coach to say, hey, we're going to work together for this grand vision, right? And the new owner says, hopefully, right, hey, okay, I want to make this organization as good as possible. You want to make this organization as good as possible. Let's lay out that strategy. Let's lay out that plan from ground zero, without having any of the previous holdover from the organization previously and how the old owner thinks that it should have ran. When you have some of these organizations where they've had the same owner year after year after year after year, I think that things sometimes get stale. And they're going to want to do things exactly how they've always done it. And that could mean that there's a reason why they're not successful. And even in the New York job, possibly, right, is ownership could be the reason why, hey, we have always done it this way. We're going to always do it this way, regardless of who the new coach is, whoever our new GMs are, whatever it's going to be. We're always going to do it this way. And that's why some of these organizations do not have success.
That's fair. I think bad ownership is probably the biggest killer of any organization. With that said, so that brings us to the next point. The coaches on the market, the next up-and-coming head coaches. We compiled a little list of options out there. Josh McDaniels, Eric Bieniemy, the KC offensive coordinator. Lincoln Riley, of course, Oklahoma head coach. Jim Harbaugh is an interesting name I've thrown in there. Urban Meyer. Chris Peterson, who just retired or resigned from the Washington Huskies head coaching position. Former Boise State head coach, has a lot of pull. Is a smart, innovative guy in his own right. Greg Roman, the Baltimore offensive coordinator, has gotten a lot of love recently. Former San Francisco offensive coordinator as well during the Kaepernick years. Robert Saleh, the Niners' current defensive coordinator. Kevin Stefanski, who's the Vikings offensive coordinator. And lastly, Mike McCarthy, the former Green Bay Packers head coach. Not to mention Ron Rivera, who we threw out there as well. Is there any dream pairings you have from this list?
I don't know about necessarily dream pairings. I would like to see Lincoln Riley with Dallas, though I don't know if Dak Prescott is the quarterback I would like to see him with in Dallas. But I think Lincoln Riley could have a lot of fun down there.
Well, I think Lincoln Riley prides himself on being a bit of a quarterback guru. You're in this weird, tricky position where you're Dallas, and you have this piece there, this Dak Prescott, which is a bit of an enigma. We don't really know what Dak is. Despite his win-loss record, despite the statistics we've seen from him, they kind of feel a little bit hollow. Like we don't really know what's behind those numbers. We see the ineptitude against those tougher teams right now this season. And I do think that adding a dynamic young head coach like Lincoln Riley could be a good answer, especially because if you want to tie those two at the hip for the next 10 to 20 years, well, bring in a guy that's going to be around for that length of time, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't think Lincoln Riley is completely unfamiliar with the media because at Oklahoma, at Norman, you're the only game in town. I think that, and obviously Oklahoma, they're one of the big blue chip football organizations in college football. They're arguably a top 5 brand in college football. So I don't think that going to Dallas would be completely over his head or outside of his skill set.
That's the thing is also proximity wise, right? he probably has a following in Texas because Oklahoma is so close to Texas. Even though I know the Texans, they love their football. TCU hasn't been as good as they have been in the past, but UT has been a little bit better in recent years. You've also got Baylor down there, but I'm sure that there's quite a bit of people from northern Texas that like Oklahoma, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, Oklahoma in general has a big following. They're, arguably a top 5 brand, and they're one of the most exciting offensive brands when it comes to NCAA football. So, yeah, I think you're exactly right. Lincoln would be fun to watch in Dallas.
Some of the other ones I could see happening. So Mike McCarthy, I've said it on this podcast before, and I think I'll just reassert that. I think he's probably going to be the Cleveland Browns head coach. I think it's an unsexy hire, but honestly, if you're Cleveland, you need a not sexy hire.
Mm-hmm.
You had too much sexy this year, and look what that got you. Now you just have a fat baker and a creepy mustache.
and people getting suspended for swinging helmets.
Exactly. So I think that they could dial it back, and honestly, getting a low-profile head coach like Mike McCarthy or Ron Rivera is probably in their best interest. I think that they made a big mistake when they hired Freddie Kitchens over Greg Williams. Granted, I didn't think that Freddie Kitchens would be this dumb, but here we are.
Yeah. That is a really good pairing, is a Ron Rivera with a Cleveland. I think that could be a lot of fun. I think Cleveland has to do some things to beef up their offensive line a little bit, but they could be a fun team to watch with Ron Rivera.
Jim Harbaugh, will he come back to the league? Listen, he's one of Michigan's already winningest head coaches, but that one black stain of not being able to beat Ohio State is just following him around so much to the point that Jim Harbaugh has never really been at a place longer than 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
We're hitting that mark right now with Michigan. Do you think he's back in the NFL next year? Do you think someone just throws him gobs of money to get him into the league again?
I honestly, with all of the openings that we can see, right, and there's a ton of them, or possibly they haven't all been announced yet, but I'm pretty sure that there's going to be at least 4 openings at the end of this year, maybe 5 at least. I think, why not, right? Jim Harbaugh's been in the league before. He's gotten to Super Bowls. He's doing a great job at Michigan. You're right. His one stain is the Ohio State University. He cannot get past them. But I would take a guy like a Jim Harbaugh.
Where, though? I say the Giants. I would love Jim Harbaugh with the Giants.
The Giants would be good. I'm trying to think. I would hate to see Jim Harbaugh go to a Lions or the Jacksonville. I don't think that would pan out. Washington, no. I would say Atlanta would be good, or the Giants would be good.
Yeah, some of the other head coaches here, let's see, Eric Bieniemy, the KC offensive coordinator. We know how good that Andy Reid head coaching tree has been historically in the league. So I think I'd love to see him go to a place that will give him a great opportunity. So looking at the remaining list, that's the tough one. I guess if I was to see, I would love to see actually Eric Bieniemy go to Atlanta. What the pieces they have on offense, if he could incorporate some of the things that Andy Reid has done as a play caller, I think that might be finally the answer that the Falcons have had in the wake of Kyle Shanahan leaving them.
Yeah, I think that would be really good. And Matt Ryan, he has some of the intangibles that make a really good quarterback. Like, he can throw the ball far. He can throw it accurate. He hasn't necessarily looked as good this year as he has in the past, except if it's garbage time, then he looks great. And then when the game starts to get close again, he falls apart. But that being said, like, he is a really good and underrated quarterback. I think Eric Bieniemy, he'd be fantastic in Atlanta.
And then we'll just go through a couple more. Greg Roman. Let's say the Carolina Panthers retain Cam Newton. So Greg Roman has made Lamar Jackson amazing. He made Colin Kaepernick amazing. Clearly, he knows how to work with a running quarterback. Now, I don't know if Cam is necessarily the same athlete he was or at necessarily those guys' tiers when Greg Roman had the ability to work with him. But I think that Greg does such a great job of scheming his quarterbacks to where they don't really risk injury despite running as much as they do. Lamar Jackson ran 16 times against the Niners, and I felt watching that game the Niners didn't even make hard contact once. That's the kind of stuff you see when you have Greg Roman. Sign me up for him in Carolina. I think that's a great pairing.
But that's only if they retain Cam, right? Or get another scrambly type quarterback in the draft, possibly.
Yeah, and the league is moving towards that as well. Let's
Mhm.
say, and I don't know how good of an athlete Tua is still going to be coming off of this hip injury.
Mhm.
Bit of a mobile quarterback. Let's say he falls to the Panthers. You pick up Greg Roman. That's exactly the type of piece that Greg Roman could utilize. And even if you, let's say you want to keep Cam just this year, knowing that Tua is probably going to be sitting out a year with the hip injury, that's a great opportunity for the Panthers to have both their bridge quarterback, an opportunity for Cam to show what he still has in the tank, Tua to get healthy, and Greg Roman to get an NFL head coaching position.
No, those are all great points. I think if I'm Cam, though, I might try to call it quits. I might, or not necessarily quits, but I might try to say, hey, trade me, get me out of here.
But where does it go?
I think there's a few spots. I mean, Pittsburgh will probably get Big Ben back, so maybe not there. I'm trying to think of who else.
Injured quarterback for injured quarterback. I mean, you could
Yeah.
say Los Angeles with the Chargers.
Chargers, I think, would be all right.
I've heard an interesting theory. Chargers going after Josh McDaniels and going after Tom Brady. Could you see it? Could the Chargers switch a 37-year-old quarterback for a 44-year-old quarterback?
It's something the Chargers would do. Like, so just some way to disappoint more, right? And then you get this really old quarterback that really cannot perform. Like, we've already seen Tom Brady start to deteriorate. And maybe you could say, well, living in the warm weather will be a little bit better, right? Like, you at least guarantee 8 games that you're playing in warm weather. But
let's expand on that theory. Tom Brady in the Chargers uniform. He's got his Julian Edelman and Keenan Allen. He's got a big-bodied wide receiver in Mike Williams. They're probably going to throw a franchise tag again on Melvin Gordon, so he's going to be there at least for another year. Austin Eckler's there. You can argue he'll have more weapons if he went to the Chargers.
Yeah. Melvin Gordon, though, might hold out again. If he gets franchise tagged, I think he pulls a Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah, but what will he get out of it? He hasn't got much out of it this year.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
We kind of went through this topic as much as we can. We just kind of have to wait till Black Monday at this point, see where the pieces fall.
Mhm.
But those are kind of the openings. That's what's going to happen. If we're placing bets down, I think some of the coaching hires that I mentioned, I think that's where I'm going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And the other organizations I didn't mention who are going to get their head coach, we're just going to assume that it's going to be another terrible coaching decision because that's what those organizations tend to do to their fans.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's I feel bad for those fans and those cities. You're just never going to have a good team. Sorry.
Do you feel bad for Knicks fans? Because they're going to be on a new head coach this year as well. David Fizdale is out as of today as the New York Knicks head coach. So that marks their 6th head coach in this decade alone.
Yeah, I do feel bad for Knicks fans. And what I don't understand is everybody continues to say that New York is the mecca of basketball. When have the Knicks been good? And when have the Nets been good, right? Like, New York has not been good in basketball for a very long time. Maybe at the AAU level, right? Maybe if they're producing really good high schoolers and maybe even college level, which I don't know if there really is any good colleges in New York that play basketball.
Was it like St. John's out there? A couple
St.
places.
John's, but there's no reason to. Yeah, Syracuse isn't bad, but like they haven't brought home an NCAA title. Like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I do not think New York is the mecca of basketball. Unfortunately, sorry, Knicks fans and New York fans in general. Like, you guys are mediocre, and that's what you guys have been for longer than the past decade.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and I think it's a generational thing because any good basketball in New York has completely skipped our generation.
100%.
Analysts talk about it. Chris Broussard, Rob Parker. They'll mention the good old days of the Knicks. It just is a foreign concept to me. I've never seen it. I've never seen it in my entire existence of watching basketball, the Knicks be good. I mean, you could argue the Carmelo years, but were the Carmelo years really good? They got curb stomped by the Heat, the Celtics, all the other competitive squads of that short time frame. And it was only like 3 to 4 years before they shipped out Carmelo. Amari Stoudemire was never even healthy during that time.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about bad owners. I mean, James Dolan, he's at the top of the bad owner power rankings right now. I think he might even be above Jerry Jones and Dan Snyder. it's embarrassing when you see tapes like of him kicking out fans just because they're yelling, "Sell the team." It's like, dude, have you not been watching your own product the last few years? You put out a tanking team for the last 5 years and telling your fans, "Oh, we're gonna get Zion. Oh, we're gonna get LeBron. Oh, we're gonna get name a player, name a star player." There has been so many fake jerseys bought in the Knicks franchise over the last 20 years. That's embarrassing what James Dolan and the Knicks have done.
Yeah, and from my understanding, right, they waffed on all the really good free agents. They shipped out Porzingis, who you could even say they messed up that relationship, right? You're given literally what people call a unicorn in a Kristaps Porzingis, and you still were not very good. And then you get rid of him. You open up cap space for, it was either 1 or 2 full max free agents, and you didn't get a single one of them, right? And and even worse, you lose Kyrie and Kevin Durant to the Nets, like, who are supposed to be little brother to the Knicks. James Dolan is by far one of, if not the worst owners in all of professional sports. You're 100% correct. And this is the point I was sort of making when we were talking about new ownerships, right? And especially when it comes to Carolina, is David Tepper, we don't know what he is yet, and very well could be worse than James Dolan eventually. But at least going forward, you've got the chance of, hey, this could be a really successful thing. If you are a coach and you take over that New York Knicks position, right, or a GM or whatever it is, you know you're going to the New York Knicks organization. You know that James Dolan and the brand that the Knicks have is going to be ineptitude, and it's going to be ineptitude probably for another decade.
Yeah, I mean, what's the appeal if you're a superstar athlete? So again, we mentioned 2 of these concepts here. We mentioned it skipped the generation, so our generation, and now we're at the point where players are younger than us. You know, as much as that hurts inside, players are younger than us, so they have seen even worse Knicks. They have completely missed the Mallow years. All they've seen is just garbage and tanking for nothing. I mean, no disrespect to RJ Barrett, but he's not Zion. He's not what they were promised. And I don't know if RJ Barrett necessarily has the skill level to bring this roster ever to a championship contender or even a playoff contender, and they're in the Eastern Conference. They should not be game blown out or not even have as much of a playoff chance considering that fact alone.
Yeah. And the sad thing is basketball is one of those sports where you can add one superstar. So let's say RJ Barrett is that superstar. That one superstar is supposedly supposed to be able to elevate your team, right? Especially with how small the roster is. You got 5 guys on the court at a time. And, you know, usually you got about 15 guys on the roster. Those last few guys maybe sit the bench most of the time, right? So you got about your 10 players that'll rotate throughout the games most of the time. RJ Barrett has not been able to elevate this team. Any of the guys on the Knicks right now have not been able to elevate this team out of last place in the worst of the conferences in basketball. So, yeah, if I'm a free agent, I'm not going to the Knicks. They've been bad for a long time. The owner is awful. You don't know who the coach is going to be now. So you got to hope that if you're a Knicks fan, hopefully they get the number 1 pick in the draft, and hopefully they don't screw it up.
Yeah, that's the only way they can secure a player that they can control long-term, because if they sign a high-profile free agent, let's start off with the first concept that basketball contracts mean nothing. So if a high-profile free agent is unhappy in the New York Knicks situation, which is very possible, they could just straight up dip. And then for those mid-level guys, it's almost like you have to overpay them to go to the Knicks. And what's even the appeal of the Knicks overall, just in general? Living in New York, it's a great concept in theory, but the travel to get to work every day, the cold winters, the taxes, really just as a lifestyle pill is the only real plus to living in New York. It's almost like a situation where you do have to consider that summer home in South Beach or that LA lake home, you know?
No, I mean, and you run the risk of getting mono with all the girls that Sam Darnold's kissing. Like,
oh yeah, that's just spreading like wildfire out there.
It's spreading like crazy out there. So I have no reason why I would want to live in New York outside of you like New York City. But even then, like, most of these guys, they have enough money that they can have a summer home wherever the heck they want to live. And if they want to live in a skyscraper in New York, they can do that 3 months out of the year, 4 months out of the year. So yeah, the Knicks to me is just not an attractive organization as a player, as a coach, as a front office executive.
As a fan.
As a fan, there's nothing appealing right there.
Yeah. It's just bitter disappointment. So let's talk about coaches that could fill that position. One of the popular ones listed is going to be Jay Wright out of Villanova. Why would you leave Villanova if you're Jay Wright, right? You're loved there. And I think if you're Jay Wright, you wait until the 76ers eventually tell Brett Brown it's over and move on, because you might as well stay in Philly and coach the 76ers, who have a talented roster and a great fan base, rather than going to New York with a good fan base. So you can at least say a loyal fan base and a just talent bereft organization.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is Jay Wright, I think he's probably the next guy in line that most people would think high level moving up to, you know, the NBA level from NCAA, making that jump. I mean, there's definitely a lot of other names being thrown around, right? But being on the East Coast maybe makes it a possibility of him going to New York. But you're right. I think it'd be the 76ers. And if the 76ers are not having that much success, even making it to like past the playoffs, right, and getting into the finals, I could see them parting ways with their coach.
That's an interesting thing. You mentioned Jerry Stackhouse, another college product, Vanderbilt. Here's the only thing I'll say as far as these college head coaches. If the NCAA does get put in this position where players are just leaving earlier and earlier, then maybe that's more incentive for them to get out of college before it's too late. So maybe that's the perfect opportunity for Jerry Stackhouse. But again, the question is, for a young head coach coming out of the college, how much of a leash is he going to have with the Knicks? Because you got to think about this. Fizdale was only there for a year and a half. Didn't even make it to what? We're like 4 weeks into the NBA regular season as is. That's terrible job security. Imagine moving your family to New York, getting everything all packed and everything go, and then 4 months later, you don't have a job, you know?
Yeah. The bad thing is not only that, but they waffed on their off season, right? So one, you didn't have as good a year as you had last year. And then you went into this off season promising you're going to get 2 max free agents and you're going to get the number 1 pick in the draft in Zion. And all of that fell apart. And so, of course, they're not going to be good. And like you said, you were still fired this early into the season, right? Like we're barely into December. And, you know, the regular season didn't start that long ago. They're about 25 games in or so, 24, 25 games in. And so, yeah, I think if you're a young coach, it's not a good situation for you. Like, unless you're really desperate to make that jump to the NBA. But then if you get labeled as a losing coach in the NBA, it's very hard to come back from that.
The funny thing about this whole Fizdale firing is you mentioned Kristaps Porzingis. The big theory why they even got rid of Kristaps was because Fizdale was coming in and his supposed dislike of European big men. So you got rid of your franchise player for a coach that you fired a year later. This is dysfunction personified. This is beyond dysfunction.
Yeah, this is what we mean when we say bad ownership.
Some of the other ones you listed here, Mark Jackson started the Golden State era. Obviously, the coach before Steve Kerr, right when Golden State was making a turnaround. The thing about that, and many have argued over the years, was it fair to fire Mark Jackson? Was he really keeping that team from being the championship contender that Kerr made them out to be? I like Mark, but again, he's not a sexy name, you know, so I don't know if he'll be able to sell in that New York market. Juwan Howard, I don't see the incentive for him to leave Michigan so early into his tenure there. I don't know. I just don't see who's a good fit.
Yeah.
Bring Phil Jackson back. I don't know.
I think it's going to be a coach that either is a not as well-known college guy that wants to get their name into the NBA, or it's going to be a coach that it's on their second or third tour around the NBA, right? Like they bounce from job to job, or just somebody that just wants a chance. It's not going to be one of your big sexy names, because I don't think anybody would want that job. And a lot of those positions sort of got filled last season when the Lakers were open, right? Phoenix was open, the Kings were open. So you had a lot of coaches already that were good moved off the board last offseason. And so now you don't have that many choices, and there's not a whole lot of demand for that job.
I honestly want to put a public service announcement. If you are a coaching candidate, don't pick the Knicks unless they're willing to give you like a 6 to 10 year guaranteed contract, a John Gruden-like contract. Then there is literally no incentive for you as a coach to pick the Knicks. You know the worst part about this? They're still going to be paying Fizdale like $5 million over the next couple of years.
Oh, I know. So what if they offered you a Kirk Cousins? Would you take a Kirk Cousins to
$84 million guaranteed contract? You know what, Knicks fans? I think I'm taking my talents to New York. See you up there. I'll pack my winter jacket.
Yeah, that is the price. One Kirk Cousins. So if you guys want a good coach, get paying.
Hire Kirk Cousins as your head coach.
Might as well. Like, what do you have to lose? You're not that good anyways.
Looks like you have a 98% failure rate as the New York Knicks head coach. We're just bringing back old concepts from past shows at this point.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. We'll keep doing it.
Keep tying it all together. Hang in there, Knicks fans. But you know who's really doing booming business right now? The fake jersey salesman that's already getting Knicks fans to buy the Giannis Antetokounmpo shirt right now.
You know what I think would sell? And what about this theory? What if LeVar Ball gets the NBA job with the Knicks because LaMelo is number 1 pick in the draft and goes to New York?
Poor LaMelo. Honestly, I feel so bad for LaMelo, and God, why am I always forgetting his name?
Lonzo?
Yes, Lonzo.
Yeah.
He's already become old news, and he was just drafted number 2 like 3 years ago.
I know. I think that's the thing is LaMelo's being hyped up right now. I think there's a good chance that the Knicks take LaMelo because at the very least, I know there's a little bit of overlap with his skill set and RJ Barrett, but at the very least, you got a name to sell a product in New York, and people are going to tune in. I don't even know who the number 1 prospect out of college is right now, out of the NCAAs, but I know LaMelo Ball. And people will tune in to watch him either fail or to watch him succeed.
I really hope that the lottery screws over the Knicks again, just because I hate that they just do this to their fans, honestly, that they tank on purpose. I mentioned it. I just hate, in general, the NBA tanking philosophy. I think it's garbage.
No, I agree. I hate it. Like, if it's for a year or two, that's good. But when you have teams openly saying, yeah, we're going to tank now, and we're going to do it for years, right? Like, trust the process. That, to me, is not fun to be a fan of, and it doesn't sell games, doesn't sell tickets.
All right, let's move on. We're going to move back into football. We're going to stick away from the NFL for a little bit with a couple topics here. So right now we have a big college football game taking place. The Oregon Ducks taking on the Utah Utes. That game is taking place right now. And let's just pull up the score because we're actually recording this show as this game is taking place. And it's over 37-15 in Oregon's favor. That is disappointing if you're a Pac-12 fan. This was your opportunity to get back into the college football playoffs. And now one half of the country doesn't need to watch football again.
That's the sad thing is when these situations happen, it's going to be a while again until the Pac-12 gets somebody else. Like, had Utah made it this year, there's a better chance of next year them having another Pac-12 team in, right? And the year after that. But as soon as your conference sort of gets eliminated, it's hard for the committee to put that conference in the next year. Like, it just is. Conferences have to win year after year after year to even be considered.
Well, here's the problem. This was your opportunity if you're the Pac-12 to jump on it. So you have a down year from Alabama. If Tua doesn't get hurt, you can argue Alabama's back in there. If LSU beats Georgia, then this would have been your opportunity to not have 2 SEC schools in the college football playoffs. And yeah, now you can't justify either Oregon or Utah in this bowl selection. Oklahoma is probably going to squeeze in that 4, assuming that Georgia loses to LSU, as we all expect. If Georgia beats LSU, then, of course, LSU and Georgia will both go, with Ohio State and Clemson being the other 2 seeds. Disappointing because, again, college football is very regional. So when you eliminate half the country just in terms of the Pac-12 just being excluded as much as they are, then it just hurts the entire sport. I do think that if you're schools like USC and UCLA, you have to step up your game because Oregon and Utah can't carry this conference themselves. In our other football non-NFL news, the last remaining football organization, professional football organization outside of the National Football League, the XFL, which is set to debut shortly after the Super Bowl. We've talked about this league before on the show. Like I said, they're the last ones remaining, so Arena Football League is out. They officially released their new uniforms. And I got to say, so I released a few Insta polls this week. So here's how the Slumpbuster community ranked them respectively. So starting off at the bottom, The least liked jersey, St. Louis Battlehawks. Worst name in the entire XFL, so I think I'll agree with that one. Only a 46% approval rating. Washington Defenders at number 7, so 52% approval rating from the audience. Then we got a tie for the 5 slot. So New York Guardians, Tampa Bay Vipers. I personally like the Vipers design a little bit. I thought it kind of had a unique little thing going on with the green. You don't really see that on too many NFL uniforms.
Like Oregon, like a reminiscence of some of the Oregon Ducks uniforms, right, that they have. I liked it.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of reminded me of the Coal Rush Seattle Seahawks uniforms as well. Then we're getting into the top 4. So Houston Roughnecks, 64%. A lot of people said this looks like the replacements jerseys from the movie. I could see it. A lot of people are really digging also the star on there, though it's been compared to the Patriots jersey a lot too. So kind of a ripoff, but it still is a pretty crisp looking jersey. 64% approval. Seattle Dragons sitting at 66%. Kind of a unique, you can argue they may have ripped off UAB a little bit with this one, but I liked it. I don't know. I mean, Dragons just kind of bring out the inner middle schooler in me that says, oh man, that's cool. Yeah, I mean a dragon or something.
I like the dragon on the helmet. It looked a little bit Denver Bronco-ish to me, the majority of the uniform outside of the green sleeves and the dragon on the helmet, but it's not a bad design.
All right. Then we have the Dallas Renegades. So I like the Dallas Renegades design. 71%. They finished second in the poll. They're really good looking, but the problem for me, and we're going to talk about this whenever it comes to picking our favorite XFL team for the year, I just can't support a Dallas-based football organization. So I'm out on the Dallas Renegades design.
That's the thing is I can separate my love of design from my hate of particular cities and regions. I think Dallas Renegades, that design is my number one. I'm going to say that I love them the most. They're not my team. I will never cheer for a Dallas football organization, but I do love the design.
And our number one finisher was the LA Wildcats. Now, my question here is, are they going to outsell the Chargers in LA?
Could you imagine they fill up the stadium with LA Wildcat fans more than LA Chargers?
Are we going to see more Rivers jerseys over the next few years, or whoever the hell the Wildcats put in there as quarterback?
Oh, man. I mean, I would actually not be that surprised if they sold more season tickets to the LA Wildcats than they did the LA Chargers.
Oh, you know what? A jersey I would love to have. He Hates Me LA Wildcats jersey. So, the story behind He Hates Me, one of the original XFL players.
No. What?
No? Oh,
no,
gosh.
I don't know that.
It's one of the best things about even the XFL documentary. I think we're going to have to do a review over the XFL 30 for 30 before the league debuts. Mm-hmm. But one of the unique concepts they have, and you've even seen this adopted by a couple other sports leagues, is the players were allowed to wear their nicknames on the jersey, right? So one player and one of the better running backs of the league put He Hates Me as his uniform name. So basically, he scores a touchdown, he points at his jersey, He Hates Me.
That's actually pretty interesting. That's pretty cool.
Like I said, we'll watch that documentary. We'll do a review of it for the channel. Stay tuned for that one. Mm-hmm. All right, so pick a team. Who are you going with? Who's your squad for the year?
I'm conflicted. I'm going to go LA Wildcats, though. I mean, I've got to align my basketball team, my baseball team. Unfortunately, there was no LA teams when I was choosing football. Otherwise, I probably would have been a Rams fan. But ended up going Pittsburgh. So I got to have a football team in LA. I'm going to go LA Wildcats.
Okay. I think, so like I said, I like the Renegades design. I just can't go with the Dallas team. I might as well go with the closest Texas team I have to me, being here again in Austin, Texas. So I'm going to go with the Houston Roughnecks. I think, I might even go check out a game just out of curiosity for this. Like I said, with the XFL, I was disappointed they didn't branch out into more markets that didn't already have an NFL team. Mm-hmm. But, spring football, I think there's a lot of people that will come out for it. I'm excited for the XFL.
Yeah, and hopefully it does well. I mean, I hope the players can get paid, right? It's another route to getting players paid outside of the NFL. I hope ownerships are good, and hopefully this league doesn't go under as well.
Our first giveaway will be an XFL jersey.
You need to stop promising these giveaways, Juju. No, I already have people asking me about their year subscription for green chili.
Hey, I only assume that just because you're in New Mexico, so they're just bum rushing you to get that year subscription to green chili.
Yeah, no more. My pockets cannot handle it. My bank
come
account's
on.
Already at zero.
I can promise away your money. Okay. This is a lesson in what can go wrong from a podcast radio perspective. So Tim Ryan, a Bay Area reporter, been around the Niners for years. He got under fire for a comment he made about Lamar Jackson in regards to the recent Baltimore 49ers tough contested beatdown of a game that happened this past Sunday. He had a theory behind why Lamar Jackson was so impossible to tackle. He's really good at that fake. Lamar Jackson, but when you consider his dark skin color, with a dark football, with a dark uniform, you cannot see that thing. Ryan fixed his face to say on air, I mean, you literally could not see when he was in and out of the mesh point, and if you're half step slow on him in terms of your vision, forget about it. He's out the gate. So, Andre, what do you make about this concept? Because I feel like, you're probably better to talk about it than I can.
Oh, man. PR 101. Do not comment on people's skin color. Just say, like, if you're going to add in dark skin into whatever you're going to say, don't say that in an open forum. I mean, it's just so bad. It's almost hysterical. It's funny, though, because I really do not think that Tim Ryan meant it in a malicious way. I don't think Tim Ryan is racist, right? Like, I don't think he's like, oh, Lamar Jackson cheats because he's black, right? Like, that's not what it is. I think he really legit meant that it's hard for me to see the ball when Lamar Jackson has it. And, I mean, maybe there's a point there. Like, it's a little bit shadowy underneath the jersey. But these are things you probably should not say on air.
It reminds me of that Bill Burr bit where he's talking about one of his favorite things on television is seeing a 55-year-old white sports commentator talk about why black athletes are so much better than the white athletes. And that's exactly what happened here to Tim Ryan. Richard Sherman has jumped to his defense. Dee Ford has jumped to his defense. A lot of these Niners players are like, yeah, this dude didn't mean it in any kind of way. Mm-hmm. And some are even saying that maybe you even brought up a good point. It's just one point that you probably shouldn't really mention on air.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing is I think there was nothing malicious in what he said. He really was not trying to take a stab at Lamar Jackson's skin color and all black people, right? Like otherwise he would be saying this about every black quarterback. If he was saying it about every black quarterback that's played in the league that, hey, these black quarterbacks, you can't see the ball when they have it, right? Because their skin color. Then I'd be like, okay, that's a little bit far, right? Like that's a little bit weird. But the fact that he's talking about like, it's hard to see with the uniform and, he's covered over. And he mentions Lamar Jackson is a fast quarterback, which he 100% is, and he's good at the fake. There is nothing wrong with it. It's just everybody has to watch what they say. You and I included, right? We put our foot in our mouth all the time. It's probably why some people hate us. But
yeah, I mean, Dre, honestly, though, it's good to know that you have an opportunity as an elusive NFL quarterback, according to Tim Ryan.
That's what I got to do. As long as I play for a team with dark jerseys.
Yeah, you can only play night games, apparently.
Only night games, dark jerseys, and I got to go get my tan on a little bit more.
Just a little. All right, but that wasn't the only big radio blow up this week. Jerry Jones, probably rightfully so, and this is going to lead into the next topic, had reason to be a little bit peeved on the air, a little bit upset. Now, we can say this because we're on a podcast, which isn't FCC regulated, but he basically proceeded to just say bullshit a bunch of times. And the radio station has like a specific kind of machine that regulates out cuss words if a listener or a guest was to mention them on air. And apparently just Jerry Jones said bullshit so many times that the machine kicked him off.
They just bleeped out his entire session.
Yeah, so I understand it considering Mitch Trubisky's just out there ending careers last night, looking like Lamar Jackson himself. I wonder what Tim Ryan's theory on why Mitch Trubisky was so elusive was.
Dark skin and the dark uniforms, Juju.
I thought the lights were just a little bit too much. The Mitch Trubisky just looked like a blur running through those Cowboys defenders.
You gotta watch what you say on air, Juju.
Yes. But yeah, no, it's crazy, but Jerry Jones just had a blow up. I mean, it's bubbling up to Jason Garrett getting fired. That's what we're all suspecting. The Bears beat the Cowboys by a final score of 31-24, and the game wasn't really that close, if we're being honest about it. The Bears pretty much dominated that entire game. Most of Dak Prescott's production came in garbage time. If you are Mitch Trubisky, good for you. You've saved your job at least the last few weeks. I think, though, it's funny because I feel like Mitch Trubisky, like I said, is seriously going to earn the title of job killer. He killed John Fox's career. We saw him destroy Jason Garrett's career last night. And I think if you're Matt Nagy, you have to be kind of like that sock puppet meme where he's just kind of like creeping up and like with his eye just, yeah. That's pretty much where Matt Nagy is watching Mitch Trubisky kind of give him these mixed messages with, is he a capable quarterback? Is he not? The answer is probably closer to not, if we're being honest about Mitch Trubisky. Even despite this quality performance, let's face it, he's always going to get compared to Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, those other players in his draft class, especially since the Bears traded up to grab him at pick 2. Yeah, it maybe is unfair considering those two are generational talents. But at the same time, if you're the Bears GM, you have to look at that and think, man, with this defense, if we had those two quarterbacks.
Yeah, that's a potential Super Bowl right there.
But as far as the Cowboy side, because, everyone wants to talk about the Cowboy side and probably for the right reasons, who is going to win this NFC East?
Yeah, my question to you today was going to be, if you're a fan, which fans do you feel worse for? Do you feel worse for the Dallas Cowboys or the Philadelphia Eagles? Because the Eagles are given every opportunity to win this division, and they cannot seem to get ahead. Like, if they had just beaten Miami, they would be ahead right now. Like, that's all you got to do is beat Miami, and you couldn't even do that.
There's been so many teams that have made a season off of just beating Miami, and you couldn't ball up for 1 week. I'm not even an Eagles fan, and I wanted to sign that petition and make them walk home from Miami.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have. Oh, my gosh. It's got to be frustrating for both franchises.
It's ridiculous. I mean, I can't feel too bad for Eagles fans considering they did just win a Super Bowl a couple of years ago. Cowboys fans, it's been a 20, 30-year drought right now. But, again, I can't feel bad for them just because, they're the Cowboys.
Yeah. Now, what I will also say is whoever does get in, you're still going to have one home game, right? And the last 2 times that a losing team got into the playoffs and played at home, they were able to win at least that first game. So, on the NFC side anyways.
Yeah, but with that said, if you're the Cowboys, you are going to be facing probably the way it's shaping up, either the Niners or the Seahawks. Are the Cowboys going to win either of those 2 matchups?
I know. No, they're not. I mean, I just don't see it right now. The way they're playing. And Garrett, I think, knows that his job is on the line. Like, I think he knows his job is not on the line. I think he knows his job is done. I don't see them winning that game.
Yeah, this team just looks like it's quit. Like there's no punch left because Troy Aikman and Joe Buck kept saying it on the air. This performance against the Bears was very similar to how their game went the previous week against the Bills.
Mm-hmm.
They just come out storming. They scored that opening drive touchdown, and then they just did nothing for the next 2 quarters up until the last 5 minutes of the 4th quarter where the game was already shot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this team, they are not performing up to their talents. Dak Prescott has lost himself so much money over this point that he should be happy that the Cowboys are going to use the franchise tag on him.
Yeah. And so a lot of people had even been saying this is sort of their year to get it done. If they don't get it done this year, their chances sort of go out the window. Next year, all of those players start to get more expensive, right? Like, you got Zeke already had his contract restructured. You got a franchise Dak. You got, Amari Cooper. Like, you got all of these guys that are going to be starting to want more and more money. And so you're going to lose even some of the talent that you already have on the team. So your talent's going to get possibly even worse than it is this year. And it's going to be more expensive, right? Or just as much. It's going to be a little bit rough.
Yeah, you built your team to run the ball, and your offensive line is just going to keep deteriorating over the next few years, whether that be losing guys through free agency or those players just not being nearly as good as they once were. Zeke only really has, maybe 3 years left. And we've seen even right now that he's starting to fade off as things go. He scored 2 touchdowns last night, but at the goal line. So I'm not going to put too much stock in it because we're not seeing those explosive runs from Zeke Elliott this year. Maybe he had too many margaritas over the offseason because he's just not running with that same explosiveness this year.
Yeah. And I mean, we know the shelf life of running backs, and maybe we're starting to see his start to expire.
It's a shame. If you're the Cowboys, I don't see where this team goes. Bears, do they still realistically have a playoff chance? I mean, they're sitting right now at 7-6. They're not going to be able to catch the Niners or the Seahawks, I don't think. But for that 6th seed, They have to catch the Vikings probably more than likely. A lot needs to break right for them, though.
Who do you think wins this division?
Wins the NFC North or the NFC East?
NFC East. Who do you think wins?
The schedule favors the Eagles,
Mm-hmm.
but here's what I'll say. It comes down to them being able to beat the Cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
And for as bad as this Cowboys team is, I feel like they own Philly over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think you're right. So I agree. I think I'm going to take the Cowboys with that one. And then the Bears, they have just such a slim chance. I don't think that they make the playoffs.
Okay, that's fair. So let's get into this weekend schedule, right? Starting off in the morning, Panthers, Falcons, a vacant coaching position versus a soon-to-be vacant coaching position in the NFC South. This game is starting off with the Falcons as a 3.5-point favorite. I'm going to take the Panthers in this one. I don't know the statistic off the top of my head. Just the weirdest thing happens. Teams just win after their head coach gets fired. Even the Redskins pulled out a win this year after Jay Gruden got fired. I'm going to pick the Panthers this week. I think they're the better team.
I was going to say that exact same thing. I think the Panthers, just because I think it injects life sort of into the franchise. So I'll agree. I'll go with the Panthers.
Even if it's fleeting just for a week, but I think it's likely. This one's going to be a good one. It's an underrated good one, but a good one nonetheless. The Baltimore Ravens are going to be 6-point favorites on the road going into Buffalo this week. The Bills have had some pretty good rest time coming off that Thanksgiving Day game. 6 points? Do you think it's unfair to them to be giving them that line? I mean, in all reality, the Bills aren't out of it for a first-round bye. They could still win that AFC East, as crazy as it sounds. I mean,
they could and topple that giant known as the Patriots. I don't know. The Ravens just look so good right now. And the one knock that I had against them early in the year is that they were playing close games against not such great, competition. Like they had a close one with Pittsburgh. They had a few other close ones or games that they had lost. But now they're starting to win those really tough games against really good teams.
They're starting to blow people out.
Yeah, and they're starting to blow people out. So I think the Ravens will win this one.
Well, I'm going to stay consistent because I picked the Bills on the Fantasy Football Podcast, so I'm going to do the same thing here. My reason for doing this is because I do think that the Niners, they didn't contain Lamar completely. Like Lamar still got his licks in, but I saw some cracks. And I think a smart coach like Sean McDermott, a tough defense like the Bills have, a tough athletic defense, can contain him a little bit. And if they could contain him, it's just going to be what can Josh Allen do on the other side. I'm going to take the Bills. Upset pick here.
Okay.
Next game in the morning. I'm probably not going to be watching this game, probably. But the Cincinnati Bengals are going into Cleveland as 7-point underdogs to the Browns. Baker Mayfield has thrown like 8 passing touchdowns against the Bengals in his rookie season. I think that's going to continue. I'll take the Browns despite the dysfunction.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Browns still want to try to fight. Even though they lost to Pittsburgh, they still want to try to fight for that wild card. And
they're going to fight for 7 and 9 right now.
I know. I think they still want to. And division games, though, like it just always is intense. I think the Browns need just a good story to get back on track. I'm going to take the Browns as well.
Not much to talk about with the game, but you see Odell Beckham's quote. Do you think he sticks around in Cleveland, or do you think he demands a trade?
How long is on his contract? Do you know?
Oh, he said a couple more years.
Is it a couple?
Because he signed that extension before the Giants traded him away. The infamous Gettleman. We didn't sign him to trade him away, quote.
Yeah, you're right. I think he'll want to trade out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lifestyle thing. I don't think that Odell wants to be in Cleveland. And I think, I don't know, maybe he just ends up in a flashy market. I'm going to call a team here. Odell Beckham is going to be in a Los Angeles Chargers uniform by next year.
Oh, okay.
Next game of the morning, the Washington Redskins, 2-game winning streak, are going into Green Bay, 12.5-point underdogs. I will take the Packers, but I will not take the points because what I will say about this is Redskins do something that gives Green Bay a lot of trouble. They run the ball. They're going to run the ball like 40 times in this game between AP and Darius Guice. So if you have those two players in fantasy, bump them up the rankings here. But when you look at going back to the Philly game, going back to the San Francisco game, these type of teams give the Packers a ton of difficulty. Like I said, give me the Packers, but I think you're talking about more like a 6-point game.
Yep, I agree with you. One, just because of the running aspect. Two, Aaron Rodgers seems to fall off. After he has a really good game, he comes back down to earth. I don't think he'll have 2 good games in a row. Trust me, I live it. He's my fantasy quarterback in one of my leagues, and it's frustrating as all heck, right? He has these really great games, and you're like, man, if I could get this Aaron Rodgers every single week, I'd be happy. But it never happens. He never puts it up 2 weeks in a row. I agree. I still take the Packers. I think they're the better team, but I don't think that they cover that spread.
If only he could play the Giants and Raiders every week, right?
Then I would have won every single game.
You'd have like 70 passing touchdowns already this year.
I know.
Well, he does get to play the Lions, but the Lions get to play the Vikings this week. The Vikings are 13-point favorites at home. This Lions team is pretty much quit. I picked the Vikings defense as a popular streamer this week, given that the fact they get to play David Blau. Again, I don't know what David Blau did to the Madden Raiders to get a 48, but I'm sure that they had good reason to give him that grade. Mm-hmm. So Vikings, and I'm going to change it up. I do think they cover.
You think so?
13 points, it scares me a little bit, but I think at home, the Skull crowd is going to be pumped up. Mm-hmm. And I think Thiel's back this week. So if he is, those 2 weapons at the outside, who do the Lions have that are going to contain those 2?
Yeah. I'll take the Vikings. I won't take the 13-point spread, though. I'll take the under.
Okay, fair enough. Another game that's just going to be hard to watch, the Dolphins versus the Jets, the rematch. The Jets are 5-point favorites at home. This Dolphins team, God bless, they're scrappy. I said this also on the Fantasy Pod. If you were the Dolphins and you didn't want to win games, you should have not signed Ryan Fitzpatrick. Because that guy, he doesn't give up on a season. He will go into the offseason, eat 50 pounds of cake, come back, and then just have a blow-up 5-touchdown game. And I know we say they play tough, but come on, they're breaking out trick plays now. You had to have seen that punter to
the kicker
touchdown they put up against Philly. Brian Flores went into that game and said, you know what? We are going to end Philadelphia's season right here today. Too bad they didn't realize that the Cowboys decided, we're going to keep Philly alive in this division.
Yeah, it was just an insane play. And I heard that hasn't been done. I can't remember in how many years, but it's been like more than 20 years or something like that, that a punter has ever passed a kicker for a touchdown.
You want to go with the prediction first on this one?
I'm going to go Jets are at home.
Jets are at home. Might be a little crappy weather too.
Yeah, and I think the Dolphins beat the Jets early already once the season, right?
Yeah. So that's what I was kind of thinking. I think that it's more likely they split than the Dolphins sweep the season series.
I agree. I think I'm going to take the Jets.
Yeah. I mean, the Jets underperform. Another thing I want to bring up, though, Adam Gase's quote last week kind of went under the radar, but people were asking him, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? And he was to the reporter, we're game planning. Yeah, you game planned. That's why you got beat by the Bengals in a blowout.
I know. The worst team in the NFL, just to be clear.
Yeah, they're so bad that even I couldn't elevate them in the ranks despite a win. So that's how far you have fallen. At least I could drop the Jets because that's exactly what I did in this week's rankings.
Yeah. No, I agree. I did the same thing. I was like, can I really move the Bengals up? Because they're bad. Nope. But I could move the Jets downward.
Shout out to Andy Dalton. I know I didn't mention it during the Bengals-Browns talk, but shout out to Andy Dalton. You get benched for just a god-awful quarterback in Ryan Finley, and you have enough character as a player, as an athlete, to go out there and still perform for your team in a season that's lost. Quality dude. I want to see him on a roster next year.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next game of the morning. Colts, Buccaneers. 3-point favorites, Tampa Bay at home. What do you think?
So I think that I'm going to go with the Buccaneers.
Okay.
One, because it's at home. They're starting to look a little bit better, and the Colts have sort of fallen off from where they started the season. I had thought originally that, hey, the Colts have a good shot at making the playoffs. They were performing like it, and now I think they're sort of starting to taper off here at the end of the year. Give me the Bucs.
Yeah, the Bucs have a really good, productive offense, and I don't really know what the Colts are going to be able to do to slow them down. I think what it's going to come down to is just turnover ratio in this game, because I do think at the bare minimum, the Colts are a very disciplined team and won't turn the ball over. Whereas we know that we can't say the same about the Tampa Bay offense. If Jameis has less than 2 picks, I think the Bucks. So I'm going to go with them for now, but I will throw that little caveat in there.
Yeah, that dude has an insane amount of interceptions that he throws.
Broncos are going to be playing the Texans. Texans are a 9-point favorite in this one. I don't like that line. Maybe it's just because it's crazy, but the Broncos just have, we talked about point differentials. Mm-hmm. They're less than a negative 10-point differential. So again, if the season went like different for about 2 minutes, the last 30 seconds of like 4 games, this team could be competing. And that's why I didn't mention Vic Fangio on our list of potential like coaches on the hot seat, just because I thought this team has performed, if not underperformed, but performed well enough to where they're in games. Mm-hmm. Vegas, I think, has a study on this, these coin flip kind of games, like you go year after year. Some of these start turning into wins. So I wouldn't be surprised if you told me the Broncos were competing next year. With that said, do I think that the Texans are going to have a letdown game after blowing out the Patriots on Sunday night? It's very likely, but it's not going to happen. I'm going to pick the Texans.
Yep, I agree. I'm going with the Texans. The Broncos, I think next year will be that sort of year for them. And the same thing sort of happened with the LA Chargers. So the Chargers had lost, like, there was one season where right before they made the playoffs, they had lost a ton of games by a field goal or less for one whole season. They finally got a good field goal kicker and they were able to get into the playoffs and then unfortunately lose to the Patriots. Sorry, Ayers. But you're exactly right. I think next year will be the Broncos' year possibly. I'll go for Texans for now, though.
It's what I was saying about the Niners for years, too. Like, they had a stretch there where they lost, like, 6 straight games by, like, 3 points or less. Some of these just start turning into wins, and that's kind of why the Niners are in this season that they are having. But they are going into New Orleans this weekend. Now, this game, again, we talked about last week's game with the Ravens and Niners just being a big-time game, a lot of playoff implications. Well, this one even more so, because it's crazy how tough the NFC is right now. The Niners literally went from the 1 seed to the 5 seed just by losing that game last week.
I know.
How ridiculous is it that we can realistically see a 13-3 5 seed?
Yeah, it's crazy. The NFC is just incredibly competitive this year. I mean, I think it always is. The NFC is a really tough conference. The AFC, outside of like the Patriots, right, and a few of those teams that have always been there sort of generationally, it's just not as tough top to bottom as the NFC is.
So the Saints right now are 2.5-point favorites. I think that's the Vegas home bump right there. Mm-hmm. But I mentioned this before. I said it. The Niners match up really, really well against this Saints team. I think their ability to be able to contain Drew Brees in that pocket will come into play. Because they get D Ford back. They're one of their top-end pass rushers this week. Mm-hmm. They have those twin towers in Eric Armstead and DeForest Buckner. I think this is going to be one of those games in which the Niners defense can impose their will a little bit. So go ahead and give me the Niners on the road.
Of course you would take the Niners. Just to combat you, Juju, I'm going to go with the Saints.
Hey, I'm okay with it. Anytime you went against my Niners this year, they won. So
I know they're probably going to win this game too.
Keep feeding the dragon. Keep doing that during Super Bowl weekend.
I know. Right. And honestly, to be honest, I have not been impressed by the Saints these past few weeks, especially like even though they won, the fact that you give up 3 straight onside kicks, like come on now, and you almost throw away that game in which you're blowing them out, like that to me definitely worries me, and that's why I was leaning for the 49ers. But again, just to be different from you and give you crap, I'm going to take the Saints.
Okay. God, just coming after me.
Yeah, it's all you, Juju. I'm coming after you.
Well, brother, you know what's coming after you this weekend? Minshew Mania is back, and it's taking place in Duval, as they will be playing the Los Angeles Chargers. Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be 3.5-point underdogs to this Chargers team. I kind of feel dirty about naming the Chargers the favorite any week right now, just given how they've underperformed. I mean, we called it last week, not to be disrespectful heirs here, but to be honest, we said, you're really going to tell me that they're 3-point favorites going into Denver?
And what happened? I mean, I'm just saying, like, stats don't lie. They're bad, especially against bad teams.
Well, they are a bad team. That's the thing. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's deniable at this point. This team, they got a big plus this week with the return of their safety, Derwin James. But overall, I don't know if a safety is really going to impact the game that much when it comes to this matchup. I think Jacksonville's been sputtering the last few weeks. I feel like I picked the Jags too much, and they've let me down as well. But I'm going to take Minshew in his return game. I think that he's just going to come off the bench fired up, provide some energy to this team, and it's going to provide a win.
I don't know why I do this. They always screw me. I'll take the Chargers, though. Again, I don't think it's an awful pick. And like you said, Derwin James, hopefully he can pull like a Minka Fitzpatrick and get like a pick 6 on his first game in. I don't feel comfortable with it, right? Like, if you tell me that the Jags win this game, especially at home, like, I'm not going to be surprised. But for now, give me the Chargers.
It's coast to coast, too. So, I mean, not that the Chargers aren't familiar with playing road games, but yeah, I'm sorry. I think that they're a bad franchise at this point. I have them below the Dolphins this week.
That's it. Sorry, Aris. Your team is that bad.
Hey, at least the Dolphins have shown some heart recently. All right. Now, this one has a lot of playoff implications behind it. The Tennessee Titans are going to be playing the Oakland Raiders. Tennessee is currently 7-5. The Raiders are 6-6. But I don't think these teams are really the same. One of these is not like the other when it comes to playoff contenders, because I mentioned that point differential for the Raiders earlier. Mm-hmm. I think it speaks a lot to really how bad this team is when you look beyond the record right now. They cannot stop the opposing offenses worth a damn. And Ryan Tannehill has made this offense move. I call Derrick Henry Krampus this year because in December, he's just straight up bodying dudes. He's just running them over. People are making career decisions out there to avoid getting in Derrick Henry's way. So I think that same thing is going to happen to the Raiders defenders this week. Tennessee, give me them on a landslide.
Interesting. I think I'm going to take the Raiders. They're at home. They're trying to get to the playoffs. They're, having a good season. I think they are pretty well coached with Gruden back, at the helm. I'm going to take the Raiders.
I just don't think they have the talent compared to the Tennessee Titans. That's the thing. And the Titans are competing for a playoff spot too. They're probably going to get the 6th seed.
Yeah, that's true. I'll still take the Raiders though.
Yeah. Okay. Another really good game this week. So we have some trash games, but we have some really good games mixed in here. The Chiefs and the Patriots, last year's AFC Championship game. Right now, opening up, the Patriots are 3-point favorite for this matchup in Foxborough. Now, the Patriots historically off a loss, they don't lose a lot of back-to-back games. Mm-hmm. That's just not their style. But I think that the Chiefs are out for blood. I think the Chiefs are trying to reestablish themselves as a AFC powerhouse. I'm going to go with the Chiefs. I've been hot on them all year. They're finally healthy again. I think that they go into Foxborough and beat the Patriots.
No way. I don't think so. I think the Patriots are going to win this mostly just because, their defense, I think, is good enough to slow down the Chiefs at least a little bit. I am worried about Tom Brady's offense, right? And, the receivers, who is he throwing to? Can they keep up with the Chiefs' offense? But I think they will. And I think there's still a little bit of the big brother sort of syndrome. Give me the Patriots.
Okay. Well, we'll see. Okay. So for your guys' game, you guys are going into Arizona this week and opening as 2-point favorites on the road. Now, I don't know. I gave up on Arizona after last week, what the Rams did to them. That was pretty bad. And I picked the Cardinals in that game, but they got blown out. I feel sometimes I try and be too cute on these underdog picks, and it goes wrong horribly.
Very wrong, yes.
But when I pick them right, I look like a genius. So it can work both ways. With that said, I think that Kyler Murray is going to be in for a rough day at the office when it comes to this matchup against the Steelers defense. So I'm going to pick your Steelers.
Oh, well, thank you, Juju. I hope you're right, because I'm actually going to go the Cardinals.
What?
I don't. I mean, Devlin Hodges has been good for us, but I mean, nonetheless, we're still on our third string quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Juju Smith-Schuster, I think, is still ruled out. I just don't. I hope that I'm wrong, because again, this is one of those picks where if I'm right, I get to say I told you so. If I'm wrong, I'm 100% happy. And the Steelers, like we're just a baby step closer to possibly making the playoffs. I hope that we win this game, but I think the Cardinals being at home, Kyler Murray's, he's Kyler Murray. He's a fantastic quarterback. I'm going to go with the Cardinals.
Okay, fair enough. Our night game this week is going to be the Seahawks going into Los Angeles to face the Rams. The Seahawks are a 1-point favorite on the road. Now, that kind of surprises me a little bit because the Rams finally showed something on offense this week. And it's undeniable at this point, the record for the Seahawks. But I do think that we have to give a little credence to how bad this team is under the surface,
Mm-hmm.
And let's face it, the Seahawks also won this previous matchup off of a Greg the Leg miss. I know you were upset about that one.
Oh, I was pissed.
Yeah. So I'm going to take the Rams, not only because it's good for the Niners, but I just think the Rams are probably going to win the rematch of this game.
Yeah, I agree with your logic. I think I'm going to go with the Rams. And they finally showed, like you said, some signs of life last weekend. And to be honest, I did have them as one of the better teams throughout the year. I still have them as a pretty good team. But with how tough the NFC is, I don't think they have a chance at making the playoffs really this year.
Mm-hmm.
At least not anymore. They had a few bad losses in there. But I think the Rams are still a tough team that you don't want to see. So, and the Seahawks can't go undefeated. I don't think they'll go undefeated the rest of the season. So the Rams are one of those divisional games, right? That can be tough.
I think that it's funny. Should it be fun if the Rams were in the playoffs more than the Cowboys or the Eagles, respectively? I take that.
I think they're much more deserving than the Cowboys or the Eagles.
The Rams, the Bears, one of those teams. Yeah, it's a shame that anyone from the NFC East gets to go. But the NFC East does at least get this Monday night game as Eli's back, baby. He gets to take on the Philadelphia Eagles and show the youngster Danny Dimes why he doesn't belong on the field next to a legend.
Oh, my gosh.
Either that or he could bring his career win total to below 500. Which do you think is more likely?
Oh, my gosh. I think they're going to lose this game. Like, why bring Eli back? You've already touted Daniel Jones as you guys being geniuses.
Well, he's hurt.
Quarterback. I mean, yeah, there's no other options, though, for him, right? Do they have another backup?
No, Eli was the backup. So this situation was always possible.
Yeah, then I guess you're right. They have no option, right? So you do have to go with Eli.
Short of telling Pat Shurmur to go throw a football, yeah, you have to go with Eli.
And I mean, we saw Eli at the start of the year. There's a reason why they put in Daniel Jones, and they were so happy about it. They thought they were geniuses, and everybody was talking crap. Well, it got thrown back in their face. I think the Eagles, and I keep saying this, but they've got signs of life in this division. Like, you can take this division over, but you need to win these games. You're at home. This is a division game. You're playing one of the oldest quarterbacks in the league that's washed up. You should win this game. I'm going to take the Eagles.
Now I'm going to give you a situation right now. Eli Manning balls out because these Eagles defensive backs are so bad what happens the following week if you have a healthy Daniel Jones?
Oh my God. I still think you got to go with Daniel Jones.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, you got to move on to the future. And
300 yards and 3 touchdowns against this Eagles secondary. What do you do?
And I think as a coach and as a GM, you got to know that it is the Eagles secondary so bad that they lost to Miami, right? Like, and so you would hope that Eli can get you a win against this team, right? And even though as bad as Eli is, and understand that and still say, hey, sorry, Eli, we still have to move on with our piece of the future, and that's going to be Daniel Jones.
I don't like it, but I guess I got to pick the Eagles, right?
They're just so bad. Like,
they're all bad. I mentioned it. What does this team do well? Seriously, what do they do well? I can't name it right now.
Mention that they went to the Super Bowl a few years ago. Like,
that's all they have. And it's funny that they went to the Super Bowl and Eagles fans are still ready to just murder this team.
I know. It's so bad. But seriously, like, this is the Eagles' opportunity. Their schedule favors them. The Cowboys continue to lose to these teams. Like, take it over. Like, this is your opportunity, and they will let us down. But
Mom spaghetti.
Exactly.
Okay, well, that's another show in the books. We are now past episode 19, so that marks another round number next week. It's crazy to think we've all been doing this 20 weeks. Once a week podcast. We have the fantasy football show. Time is just flying by in terms of this year, 2019 as a whole. It's interesting to look back on it, which brings me my next point. So we are going to be looking back on this entire decade here in the next coming weeks. We are going to be breaking out our top 10s for the decade. Best NFL team, NBA team of the decade, best fighter of the decade. It's going to be some exciting stuff coming up. We hope you guys enjoyed the discussions. Dre, for our listeners, do you have some words of wisdom for them?
I've got no words of wisdom for you, except for if you got to make a bet on does Jason Garrett get fired after this season, take that bet and absolutely say yes.
I'm pretty sure Vegas would give you some terrible odds on this one. Given,
I mean, if somebody is dumb enough to bet on that one, definitely take whatever odds they give you.
All right, listeners. Well, thank you so much. Like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you next week.